mean, it's the thing that could kill it could be the politics around it.
Exactly.
So this is thankfully about putting up evidence-based solutions. Now, if the politicians want to kill it with rhetoric, over to them, but let's sheet the blame.
Let's talk about the rhetoric. Do political parties go tough on law and order even though they don't believe it? Because they want to be popular and win?
Pretty much. I mean, the fact is that politics, or not politics, rather, law and order is one of the big four that people vote on alongside health and education and the economy. And so what you find is that someone who wants to stay in power or someone who wants to get into power because they've been in opposition too long will run over and push that button coming up to just about every election.
National did it every time.
Well, certainly did it in 2008. That's exactly right. And then what happened was pretty much the two big parties and the only other parties left in government were pretty much on the same page, maybe apart from the ACT Party. And it just killed it. Actually, the law and order debate stopped for about 6 or 7 years because everyone was on the same page about where we needed to go on it. And then gradually it started coming back.
So what do we need to do?
Well, we need to do what works. The hug a crim stuff. So the justice system...
How many crims have you hugged?
Oh, I've hugged a few crims, but everyone needs a hug every now and then. Okay. I've shaken hands with Garth McVicker and David Garrett as well. But the thing is that in the justice sense, the hug a crim equivalent is probably restorative justice. Restorative justice works better than anything else. And yet, if you promote it, you're seen as being soft on crime. If you do the stats, there are something like 37% of crims who are in jail who actually go through a restorative justice program commit crimes at a lesser rate, and if it's done in community-based sentences, about 57%. So why don't you do that?
Well, it's hugely successful too, because if you look at some of the numbers come in, they don't re-offend.
That's right, because there's a totally different level of understanding. And so let's move down that track. I mean, you've got a system that doesn't work at the moment. Do you care enough to do something about it, or do you just want someone?
How many people are in prison? So there's about 10,600, give or take.
Getting up there.
Yeah, 10,600 in prison today. Waking up this morning having, I don't know, whatever they have. How many of those people do you think would be okay in society?
Probably quite a big chunk of them. I don't know whether you'd say half, but it'd be great if we had a prison population of about half and we got a little bit more creative with the sentences that we're dealing out to them.
Because Simon Bridges says today that everyone in jail today belongs in jail today. They all deserve
What's his position at the moment?
Everyone in jail today deserves to be in jail. Yes.
Yeah, well, if you said that, if you had a look at all the people who are in jail, there's a big chunk of them there. Well, not a majority, but there's a chunk of them there who are there for administrative crimes. So they're there because they've done something the court told them not to do, or they didn't pay a fine, or they didn't do their community work, or whatever. Is the answer chucking them into... And a lot of them are very young in that category. So...
and they become gang members as a result.
Yeah, you send them to a criminal university, give them a gang affiliation, and they come out what? And the public is safer or less safe, especially if they've been remanded in custody because apparently they can't be trusted out on the street, or we can't watch them through our government agencies to be safe on the street.
Political parties are a fraud in this.
Well, when they finally get to court, they are then released on time served, so they go out with no rehabilitation, no therapy, no one watching them.
And angry.
And not on parole, and just pissed off and poor, and they're going to commit more crime.
So who benefits most from it at the moment? Is it the male prisoners, female prisoners, the young, the old? Who do you think benefits most and is most open to it?
Sorry, benefits from what?
From doing restorative justice.
Everyone.
anyone who does it, but they are frequently largely turned off it because there's an exposure, because you're going to admit to stuff. It's much easier to stand in a dock, stare at your feet, plead guilty, go to jail, do your time. If you've grown up in a family where a number of family members have previously gone to jail, you know how to do this stuff, you're not intimidated by it. If you're a member of a gang, you may well be protected by it or whatever. But the fact is, what we do know is that if you do go through a restorative justice process and conference, actually it works a treat.
What percentage of New Zealand are law-abiding citizens?
What, all the time?
Well, let's say law-abiding citizens, on average, aren't committing any serious crime.
Here's a real cool stat for you. The cohort of all children born in 1978, a quarter of them have got a conviction. a quarter of all children born in this country in 1978 have got a conviction.
So what the point I'm making is the vast majority of New Zealanders are law-abiding citizens. Also in the system, doesn't there need to be a recognition of their right for perceived punishment? We feel, we're law-abiding citizens, we feel we've been wronged, and we need to see punishment. So the system you come up with has to satisfy that as well.
Yeah.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Does punishment stuff?
I think if punishments are creative enough, if they're about teaching people something, if you get someone and you're just going to, you know what it's like with, say, your kids, punishing your kids. You ground them for a month. They learn the lesson in the first week. What's the other 3 weeks for?
Punishment.
And that's that. It's just, does it make you feel better? No. Does it make them feel better? No. In the end...
Are you saying that you could... not to do it again? Because it takes so long that they think
the
twice.
first week or the last 3 weeks?
All of it. They go, actually, no, we don't want to do it because look what we missed out on that month. Whereas a week, they go, yeah, kind of went fast and not so much.
What you find is both parties find pretty quickly that it didn't need to be a month. And you can cross-credit that to sentences. If we make the first part of the sentence targeted, creative, so that the lesson is learned really quickly, maybe moving through the system and actually trailing these people out into something a hell of a lot more productive is going to be a far better, shorter sentence than actually a longer sentence that does nothing for the first 3 years.
So you think what Andrew Little's trying to achieve here is honourable compared to what Simon Bridges sat here today and said everyone who's in prison today deserves to be in prison today and it's a safer society with them locked in prison. See, I reckon it's garbage.
Well, that's just the opposite of what the government's saying, and that's what he sees as his role at the moment. But
are you saying he doesn't believe himself?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't had those sort of conversations. When I tried to have these conversations with Simon, the ex-Crown Solicitor came out and that sort of stuff. But, I mean, he's a good guy. We've always got on well, and I think he...
Are you saying he's misinformed?
No, I think at the moment he's trying to be the Prime Minister, so that's what you're going to hear for a while. If you know, quite honestly, if you think that all of a sudden the public woke up one day and they decided restorative justice was the way to go, smaller prisons, halve the prison population, do you think the leader of the opposition would still be banging on like this? No, I don't think so.
Did you think that when you were a cop all those years ago? I bet you didn't think like this when you were a cop.
Actually, I guess I did have quite a few of these sorts of feelings when I was a cop. I mean,
did you express them to the cops?
Yeah, at times.
What they think of you?
Well, they thought I was a bit of an oddball. But, I mean, the thing is that in the last 10 years that I was a cop, when I was locking up people for the most serious things, most people shook my hand and said thanks. So they knew what the offending was about, especially the long-term offending that had gone over generations and that sort of stuff, and they dealt with it. But the fact is, you know, I got in trouble for saying that a lot of the victims in the centre of the justice system are standing in the dock, and they are. If you actually get to know these people, they've all been offended against. Why the hell do you think people offend in this abhorrent way? Because it's a learned behaviour. So what are you going to do about that? Are you just going to bank it and say it's all votes?
It's thoughtful stuff, and I can see why you had to leave the National Party.
Well, I cut
doesn't
my own
win
track.
elections.
In spite of everything you've said this morning, I cut my own track.
I was embellishing things. But good on you, Chester. We enjoy having you on the program.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, we are 21 minutes after 7. Here's Amanda now with news headlines.
That's it.